First of all, in terms of the character of these protests, we are still getting reports from our reporters throughout the country where we have intervened and getting a sense of the scale of the protests, but by indications they are larger than the previous demonstrations, which were around 11 million total, 10 million, something like that. Certainly in the major cities, tens, hundreds of thousands in New York City and Boston and Philadelphia, tens of thousands, I think, here in Detroit and Chicago, over 100,000. These were, and there are many smaller demonstrations. We got a report of one demonstration of 2,000 in Howell, Michigan, which is very significant. This is repeated in city after city throughout the country. It is a massive repudiation of the fascistic policies of this government, the gang of criminals that occupy it, beginning with Trump, Stephen Miller, Hegseth, on down. It's a declaration of opposition to dictatorship, the vicious assault on immigrants, the Gestapo raids, the attacks on free speech, the destruction of social programs, the genocide in Gaza. This is an expression of the sentiment of the broad mass of the population. The assault on social programs, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, everything that this government and the ruling elite that it represents is carrying out. We should have, though, no illusions that this will stop the conspiracies of this government. It is engaged in a conspiracy to establish a dictatorship. In recent weeks, particularly the months since the killing of Charlie Kirk, a systematic escalation, implementation of plans, the deployment of troops in American cities, the deployment of the National Guard, including in the course of the demonstrations today, particularly in Texas and Virginia. The attack on the so-called enemy within, the threats to invoke the Insurrection Act, which would allow Trump to deploy active duty military forces in American cities under his direct command. This is a government, a criminal regime that is operating on the basis of a conspiracy to establish a dictatorship, to overthrow all democratic rights and abolish constitutional rule. The critical question which we have sought to bring forward into these protests is the basic one. What is to be done? What is the perspective? How can this government be defeated? I want to make a few points, and Jerry has referenced these, but just to stress and perhaps elaborate a little bit. First, it is necessary to understand the conditions out of which this Trump administration has arisen. Trump is not an aberration. As we've written, he's not an interloper in the Garden of Eden of American democracy. He's a representative of a class, of the oligarchy. He's the personification of a ruling class that can no longer rule through democratic means. Over the past month, this has been evident in meetings in the White House. Last month, Trump held a meeting with, this was actually right before the killing of Charlie Kirk, held a meeting in the White House with tech executives, Google, Meta, individuals who previously backed the Democratic Party, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, praising Trump for his actions and Trump praising them. Just this week, Trump held a meeting in the White House in which he gave remarks about the wonderful new ballroom that is being constructed in the White House to fet the oligarchs in the future. Present in that meeting, and he was thanking everyone for the very generous donations they had given to the government. Present at that meeting were executives from Amazon, Apple, Booz Allen Hamilton, the defense contractor, Caterpillar, notorious for its role in the genocide in Gaza, Comcast, Google, Lockheed Martin, another defense military contractor, Meta, that is Facebook, Palantir, which is centrally involved in the conspiracy for dictatorship and war, T-Mobile, countless other companies. This is a government of the oligarchy. Trump did not create this oligarchy. He is their representative. He was, in a sense, created by them. He arises out of a broader social reality through some sort of process of evolution, the natural selection, the selection of the unfittest, or however one might want to call it. Trump, in all his filth and his criminality, corruption, embodies a social layer. He is their man. And as we have stressed, he was chosen to deal with an escalating series of economic, social, and geopolitical crises for which the ruling class has no conventional, legal, or constitutional, or nonviolent solutions. This is a country that is run by an oligarchy, and many, many people understand that. One sees that in the placards that people drop. The oligarchy, opposing the oligarchy, a society in which the richest 400 individuals now control more than $6.6 trillion in wealth, while the vast majority of the population is in debt, living paycheck to paycheck, confronting a relentless decline in living standards, the consequences of inflation. This is a government which is waging war on the working class, a social counter-revolution. Every single advance, not only of the past century, but the century before it, is under attack. It's significant that these protests have raised the question of no kings and the heritage of the American Revolution, and I think many that resonates. This country is a country of two revolutions, the American Revolution and the Civil War, and all of that is being repudiated. Public education, which goes back to the American Revolution, that is being dismantled. The government is ending the Department of Education. Public health, science. I mean, Trump and his know-nothings, RFK Jr. getting up and declaring a war on vaccines, war on Tylenol. We're told, this is a government of absolute political, economic, cultural backwardness. They're destroying social programs, OSHA, under conditions in which workers are dying every day in the factories. The very even limited measures put in place against corporate exploitation, workplace safety, which hardly exists, all of it is being dismantled. And of course, the big ones, the real target, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, no one should be under any illusion that they are not planning to carry out a massive assault on the basic programs. Well, they have we call it the dream of the ruling class. They want to create a situation where workers are born, they go to work as soon as possible, they work for the extent of their lives with as much profit extracted from them as possible, and when they can no longer work, they die. That is the dream. Social retirement, health care, all of that is merely an unnecessary detraction from profit, from the wealth of the oligarchy. That is the situation, and that is what Trump represents. Again, Trump did not create these conditions. He arises out of them. He arises out of conditions which have been decades in the making under both Democrats and Republicans. After all, what has happened over the past several decades? A whole series of bank bailouts. They responded to the 2008 crisis by handing trillions of dollars to the rich, endorsed by Obama and backed by both candidates, both parties. And then under the pandemic, as tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions worldwide died, they used the opportunity to hand trillions more to themselves. Again, endorsed by, and this was under first Trump and then Biden, endorsed by the entire ruling class. So what has been the consequence? I mean, if you look at a figure like Musk, his wealth, I don't have the figures on hand, perhaps others do, but it has grown like 700% over the past several years. And you have actually a situation where you could have the first trillionaire in not too long with how things are going. So this is the situation under which Trump, or the conditions under which Trump rises to the top of the criminal underworld, rising to the top of American politics. And I think a second critical element of the objective conditions that this government comes out of is the unending imperialist war. A government, a ruling class, which is waging violence on an unprecedented scale all over the world. Trump embodies it somewhat directly at this meeting when they were talking about the ballroom. There was a revealing episode Trump was raising that no one wants to fish off the coast of Venezuela anymore because of the people they're murdering in the Caribbean. and everyone there laughed at his reference to the murder of fishermen by U.S. imperialism. But we are now 2 years, and again, this is to emphasize the point, this is not just Trump, we are now 2 years into a genocide carried out on live television before the eyes of the entire world in Gaza. 70,000 people murdered, an entire society destroyed. Of course, Netanyahu and his gang of fascists, of war criminals who plotted, planned, and executed this genocide are responsible. But they could have not carried out a single act of barbarism in this mass slaughter without the support of the imperialist powers and all the political representatives of the ruling class. And it was the Democratic Party, the Biden administration, which oversaw this and financed and politically justified this genocide in the course of its first year and a half. The genocide in Gaza itself, part of a broader, escalating global war. Over decades, the response of the ruling class to the decline of American capitalism, to the end of the Soviet Union, now 3 decades ago, has been an unending and escalating war. The Gulf War, first Gulf War, the war against Yugoslavia under Clinton, the second war against Iraq. And I would say actually these protests, to some extent, are the largest and most significant demonstrations, certainly since the 2003 protests against the Iraq War, when hundreds of thousands, millions of people around the world protested against a war that everyone knew was a war for oil. Obama, the drone bomber-in-chief, the first president to carry out an assassination of an American citizen without due process. Then, of course, the first Trump administration, and then Biden. And what was the central political priority of the Biden administration? The escalation of war, the instigation of the US-NATO war against Russia and Ukraine, which is now entering, in fact, a new stage presently, and the genocide in Gaza. And there are plans for now, and within the ruling circles, this is discussed very actively. The big one, again, the big one domestically is the attack on Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid. The big one on war, and the one they all talk about, is the war against China. And they're preparing for it. I would say we are in the initial stages of a world war. And that is deeply connected to the political situation within the United States. It's worth recalling the words of Zbigniew Brzezinski, once one of the leaders of American geostrategy within the ruling class. He wrote in 1997, "America is too democratic at home to be autocratic abroad." He said, "This limits the use of America's power, especially its capacity for military intimidation." He said, "But the pursuit of power is not a goal that commands popular passion, except in conditions of a sudden threat or challenge to the public's sense of domestic well-being." That was written, of course, before the September 11th attacks. And then he writes, "The economic self-denial, that is, defense spending, and the human sacrifices, casualties required in the effort are uncongenial to democratic instincts. Democracy is inimical to imperial mobilization." Well, they have concluded that if democracy is inimical to imperialist mobilization, let us do away with democracy in order to have imperial mobilization. Or to put it as Lenin did, imperialism is reaction all down the line. Finance capital strives not for democracy, but for dictatorship. Again, these are the conditions out of which Trump arises. And it is impossible to oppose this government without opposing these conditions. Now, the third point I want to make, and I think this is critical, is that it would be fatal, absolutely fatal, to subordinate opposition to Trump to the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is not a force of opposition. It is a force of collaboration, of complicity. It represents the same capitalist interests as Trump. There are indications that the Democrats have responded to this mobilization, No Kings demonstration, with some effort to get it under control or present itself at the head of it. Even Chuck Schumer, the senator from New York, or better, the senator from Wall Street, was apparently at the protest in New York. He made some statement about how he was happy to be demonstrating in a rally organized by the trade unions, which is a lie. It was in fact not organized by the unions. But the Schumer has spent the past several weeks saying absolutely nothing about Trump's effort to establish a dictatorship. You can go to his Twitter feed now and go back. There's not a word about the Insurrection Act, about the mobilization of troops in American cities. Everything is about, oh, well, we need the Republicans to work with us to end the government shutdown so that we can improve health care, and there's got to be a fix to Obamacare tax subsidies. Under conditions in which a government is establishing a dictatorship, that is the response of the Senate minority leader, and he comes to the demonstration and pretends that somehow the Democrats have anything to do with mass opposition. And there are other indications that the Democrats have sought to somehow associate themselves with this opposition. But to subordinate this opposition to the Democratic Party would be absolutely, as I said, fatal to the political movement against the Trump regime. It has enabled this government, has collaborated with it, and indeed it shares the fundamental program of the administration in all its essential elements: the assault on the working class, the assault on democratic rights, war abroad. To the extent there are differences, they are centered on issues of tactics related to American imperialism, particularly the war against Russia. Let us just recall the events since the first election of Trump, way back now in 2016. Obama referred to after that election, if you recall, the intramural scrimmage between two sides on the same team, the Republicans and the Democrats. The first impeachment of Trump was not over his attack on democratic rights, but on Ukraine. Then the January 6th coup, where the Democrats did nothing to, in fact, stop it. It ultimately failed, not to their own action, but to the ineptitude of the conspirators. Biden came to power declaring the need for a strong Republican Party. Why? To wage war. Over 4 years, he escalated the war against Russia, the war against the genocide in Gaza. And then what has the whole reactionary character of the Biden administration, of course, created the conditions for this con man, Trump, to win in an election. What could have been a more devastating indictment of the Democratic Party than that an individual who thought to overturn the last election in a fascist coup not only is not in prison, which of course he should be, but in fact won the next election because he's able to exploit social grievances under conditions in which there is no genuine expression within the political system. The Democrats, in fact, did not want these demonstrations. They did not seek to mobilize and encourage them. I don't think any Democrats actually issued statements calling for individuals to come to the demonstrations. It's entirely after the fact. This is the Democratic Party. And I think it's in particular necessary to stress the absolutely foul role played by figures like Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and others. Because their role is to tell you that opposition to Trump is to be developed through the Democratic Party, and it's a lie. And they know it's a lie. The Democrats are helping pave the road for dictatorship. Actually, Sanders spoke today. He was originally going to speak, as he did at the last No Kings demonstration, at the smallest possible rally he could find in Vermont. They decided, it appears at the last moment, that he had to speak in Washington, D.C. So he goes to Washington and he gives a speech, and it's full of its demagogy. He makes the following statement. Today, I say to my this is Sanders, under conditions in which a government is establishing a dictatorship. Today, I say to my Republican colleagues, come back from your month-long vacation, start negotiating, and do not allow the American healthcare system to be destroyed. His Republican colleagues, in fact, made no reference to the National Guard deployments and the Insurrection Act, no reference to fascism. I don't know how many of you may have seen the CNN town hall with Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez this week, but it was really a despicable display. Again, the words fascism, National Guard, Chicago, ICE, impeachment, dictatorship were not mentioned. Ocasio-Cortez, a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, supposedly the far left in Congress, said the following. She urged the viewers to put pressure on Republican Speaker Mike Johnson to pick up the phone He says, what is normal is to negotiate, come to a compromise, pass the bill. Mike Johnson, who said that the demonstrations happening today were a Hate America rally organized by terrorists, Ocasio-Cortez says, well, our task is to appeal to Johnson to come to the table and pick up the phone. What political bankruptcy. She emphasized the need for both parties to come to something we can agree with and reopen the government so that this fascist government can receive funding. Negotiations are all about a back and forth. This is a team sport. A statement which really actually recalls nothing more than Obama's reference to the intramural scrimmage, a team sport. Ocasio-Cortez, again, a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, is nothing more than a conventional right-wing Democratic Party figure. And I thought this was extraordinary, so it's worth citing. Asked whether there were Republicans he would work with to pass a continuing resolution to end the government shutdown, Sanders replied, great question, I can mention a number of them. And then there are some decent Republicans. And then he said, I never thought that I would say this, but you have someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, you know what, I was elected by my constituents, that's who I am beholden to, not the President of the United States. So there are good Republicans out there. And if Trump would leave them alone for 5 minutes and not threaten them with a primary, if they stood up and did the right thing, I think we can make progress. The wisdom from Sanders, the good Republicans, Marjorie Taylor Greene, the promoter of QAnon, an outright fascist, according to Sanders, belongs among the good Republicans. But this is actually the logic, absolute political drivel. No analysis of how this government is going, no perspective. It is, in his speech today, he made reference again, his Sanders stump speech, we're going to end Citizens United. That's the way we're going to return power to the people. And how is Citizens United going to be ended? By this gang of fascists in the Supreme Court? Through Congress? Through this government? How is this going to happen? He makes no proposal, no suggestion that there should be a struggle, that there actually has to be a fight. And that, and I think also it's worth, again, emphasizing in terms of the Democratic Party. What have the Democrats been doing? The last time that Trump threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act was back in June of 2019, amidst the protests over police violence after the killing of George Floyd. The Democrats responded to that mass uprising by a systematic promotion of racial politics, of identity politics. They responded with a 1619 Project, the argument that everything is about race, not class. And in fact, they sought a systematic denigration of the democratic traditions, an attack on the American Revolution, on the Civil War. They started promoting the idea of tearing down statues of Washington, Jefferson, even Lincoln, the actual democratic traditions of the United States. That became the focus. But this relentless promotion of the politics of identity, of race and gender, the politics of the upper middle class. All of this is actually contributed to the political situation that we confront today. Now, what is the perspective and program that we are fighting for? What do we propose? And this is the central question. What is absolutely required? The protests are very significant. Hundreds of thousands, millions of people in the streets, massive opposition. But for this movement to develop into a movement that can take down this government, and that is the issue, the removal of this criminal fascist conspiracy from office, that has to be developed as a movement in the working class. The working class has to be mobilized. That social force which has enormous power because it produces everything. And the social force that is the fundamental target of the oligarchy, the working class. We, the Socialist Equality Party, call on those who've been participating in the No Kings demonstrations to advance definite demands. There have to be demands associated with this movement. First, the removal of this government from power. That is the issue, the fundamental question. And that has to be associated with clear political, social demands. The immediate withdrawal of all troops from American cities, an end to the occupation by the military of U.S. cities, an end to the persecution and deportation of immigrant workers, an immediate end to the threats of acts of aggression against Venezuela, the escalating global war, the defense of democratic rights, an end to the mass layoffs, to the assault on social programs, destruction of living standards. But these demands have to be advanced and fought for. But these are demands which bring necessarily masses of people into conflict, not only with the Trump government, but with the whole political system. And they're demands that have to be developed as a movement in the working class. And again, that's the central question. The active involvement of workers, not simply in protests, but mobilizing their power as the social class which produces everything. In every workplace, factory, school, there must be active discussions over how this government can be defeated, what the strategy must be. And we propose the development of an independent network of committees, organizations, rank and file committees. There is enormous opposition, but it has to be organized. The Socialist Equality Party is calling for and indeed fighting for the development of rank and file committees in every workplace and neighborhood to organize resistance to the attack on social programs and the whole social counter-revolution of this government. And such a struggle has to be developed as a movement against capitalism and for socialism. I think if we want to sum up what this government is, this is a government acting on behalf of the oligarchy, which has declared war on the working class. It is the declaration by the ruling class that it is engaged in a conspiracy to dismantle democratic rights, to destroy constitutional forms of rule, and to wage a war on every single social program, on the conditions of workers. Everything is to be eliminated. The country is to be rolled back not only a century, but more. Every gain won by workers in bitter struggle is to be reversed, and all for the interests of the capitalist oligarchy. The capitalist oligarchy has declared war on the working class, and the necessary response of the working class is to declare war on capitalism. That is the underlying question. And that is the strategy which has to animate a movement against this government. So I just conclude by urging everyone here to read the perspective of the Socialist Equality Party. Jerry referred to the pamphlet that we have produced, which includes statements published over the past month tracing the conspiracy of the Trump government, to read the World Socialist website, which is we publish every day an analysis of not only developments within the United States, but internationally, and to develop this offensive in the working class, to turn out to the workplaces, to bring this fight into the working class. That is the conclusion that has to be drawn from these protests and from the broader fight against the Trump government. That is what the Socialist Equality Party is doing. We are fighting to arm this movement with a socialist program and leadership, and I would encourage all of you to join us, to join the IYSSE, our student movement, and to become actively involved in the fight for socialism.